Well, we having another chat about all things sport this week. I'm your host, Dakir Dowd, taking you through for the next hour. I'm joined from international journalist James Weil over in out of his day to chat to us all things rugby on the platform. We'll be chatting a little bit about local sport, what's happening on South African soil. But to start off with, there's been a topic that's been brewing for months and months, and it's finally come to light. Worcester Warriors administration will be holding discussions over potential suspension of the buyers. So would be going into administration, which means they have let go of players that are at the club and staff for that matter. So where does it leave the club going forward, knowing that there's such a long rugby season ahead? And not just a long rugby season, there's international competitions that need to be played. What exactly happened? Let's find out for our streets. James Weil, who is
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
looks like we just had a quick break in communication there, but we're back. We're going to be chatting to James Weil, Planet Rugby journalist all the way in the UK. That's going to give us an update on what exactly is happening to Worcester Warriors, knowing that there's such a lengthy season up ahead of them. It's interesting times and possibly one that many would never have seen come to rugby, one of the most followed sports in the world. Good evening, James. Thank you for joining me on Salam Media. Always a pleasure having you on the show and chatting all things rugby.
Hi, Dickie. How are you? Lovely to see you.
Great, great, great. How's things over there? How's the weather treating you?
The weather's been pretty bad today, loads and loads of rain, but I think it's important when you discuss Worcester to really understand what the position is now. So as of yesterday, the RFU confirmed that Worcester will be suspended for the rest of the season. There'll be no more rugby at Worcester. Potentially, and I'll tell you why potentially in a second, potentially they'll be starting in the championship next year. Okay? The get-out clause in terms of championship is if Warriors could prove a no-fault receivership. So as we speak tonight, for absolute clarity, Worcester are in administrative receivership. The two clubs, one club which is Worcester Rugby Football Trading Limited, which pays the players, is now in receivership, so all the players are free agents. And the club that owns the part of the club that owns the assets are also in receivership. So that's the key takeout right tonight, Zakir.
James, it's quite interesting to see that all of this happened knowing that in the business world today, the 21st century, 22nd century, if you want to call it, because everything is so ahead of time, with financial planners, financial predictions, could they have seen this coming? Or was the impact of COVID just too much?
Look, it's often said by air crash investigators and people who investigate natural disasters that one thing rarely causes the downfall or causes the disaster. It tends to be a combination of two or three things happening together that are unexpected. COVID obviously has had a bearing on the whole of the Premiership, and the Premiership is really feeling the squeeze because not only do you have an issue at Worcester, you have potentially an issue at Wasps and a couple of other clubs in terms of them really feeling the pinch. However, the thing that you have to understand here is Colin Goldring and Jason Whittingham, who are ostensibly the owners of the club, have to put it very bluntly, derelicted all forms of duty of care, any form of corporate responsibility, and they have gone out on a mission to asset strip Worcester Warriors into their own back pockets. And what you have to understand, Takir, Worcester Warriors, the actual physical facility, is arguably the best in the Premiership. It has an incredible training ground. It has a big conference facility. It is magnificent as a stadium, as good as anything even in South Africa at club level, right? However, the land surrounding the stadium had a lot of value. Over the last 6 weeks, the number of limited companies that have been started up by the owners, Goldring and Whittingham, and the movement of land, assets, and so on and so forth around those companies beggars belief. If you want to read about this, have a look at Michael Alwyn's article in The Guardian yesterday that gives you the timeline of all of the land movement and the asset stripping. There's approximately £70 million worth of land in Worcester around the various limited companies that are in administration or receivership. Okay? During that time, the owners themselves received offers to take Worcester forward, but they were so greedy that they wouldn't take these offers. The state of play at the moment with the players, the fans and the people is they're out of contract. They've got no job. They've got no income. The backroom staff around Worcester worked for a month free to put on 2 Premiership games for the goodness of their heart. For that, they will get nothing. The team are all free agents now of yesterday. The coaching staff, of whom Nick Easter and Steve Diamond have performed miracles in keeping that group of players together, those guys are now free agents and back onto the market. So it is a really sorry state of affairs. And as far as, in my opinion, this has all been caused by 2 guys that are incredibly greedy and have effectively stitched up 200 staff for the benefit of their own back pocket. It's an absolute disgrace.
James, do we see this coming with the privatization of sport? Many people are so fascinated. I mean, in football, for that matter, you've got the Arab buyers, like many would call it, and expect miracles from the likes of Man City. Recently, we've seen Newcastle United. And from a rugby perspective, we're seeing that people are buying in. You're getting franchises of teams that are opening up all across the world, and foreign investors are now coming to come invest. James, do you think this is part of the investments that are coming in, where investors are starting to think about their pockets rather than the sport moving forward and the organizations growing?
Right. So, okay, I just want to unpack that properly. If you look in the Northern Hemisphere, I can't really comment about the Southern Hemisphere because I'm not as well connected. If you look in the Northern Hemisphere, I would challenge you to find a club that is truly profitable without having some form of sugar daddy income. Even in the top 14 in France, there's a lot of municipality involvement, which offsets and subsidize community assets, which become stadiums and so on and so forth, to make the club successful. Within the Premiership itself, I believe only one club is actually in the black in terms of profit and financial stability. Every other club either has a financial supporter, such as Nigel Ray at Saracens, Bruce Craig at Bath, Tony Rowe at Exeter, who effectively bankroll it for their own hobby, their own reflected glory, and so on and so forth. However, when you get this thing happening with the sugar daddies coming into the game, the key thing is that the authorities must make sure that they are fit and proper people to carry out the regulatory duties of being an owner of a club. The duty of care to look after the staff, the duty of care to look after the spirit of rugby, that nebulous term, right? But what you have to do is to do true due diligence on the people that are becoming investors in these clubs. If you look at Worcester, Goldring and Whittingham, literally, Colin Goldring was struck off as a solicitor by the Solicitors Regulatory Authority in 2019, yet he is still deemed to be a fit and proper person. Now, the one thing I would say is the RFU and Premiership Rugby And you have to understand that the RFU, the governing body of the sport, Premiership Rugby Limited, are the delivery arm of the game in the UK, the franchise, for want of a better description. Those guys have been absolutely asleep at the wheel. What they have not done is perform proper due diligence and proper financial checks on people that have moved into the statement. There are actually RFU rules and regulations which stipulate the fit and proper purpose test. Yet where Worcester is concerned, this was not applied to Goldring and Whittingham.
It's tricky looking at this and how it happens. And I mean, especially for a lot of players that immigrate and look to start their future in a foreign country, the likes of Francois Venter, Duan van der Merwe, we know that is that come from South Africa and went abroad to look for to put food on the table and change what many would say is the legacy and history that their families have left behind. Because as we know, South Africans, we don't come from, what do we call it, opulence, if that would be the word to call it. And now you've got players that move across pastures and all of a sudden they're stuck with this. What happens to the rest of the staff that's over there, James? And I mean, people just trying to put food on the table, grinding out the hard 9 to 5.
Do you know what? Here's the thing. The people at the top of the food chain, the Duan van der Merwes, the Rory Sutherlands, those guys have already got contracts. Duan van der Merwe's gone back to Scotland. And, the guy's a world-class player. Rory Sutherland, I think, has got a contract in France. So Rory Sutherland's already sorted as well. Steve Diamond and Nick Easter, whilst it's short-term pain for them, those guys are the highest calibre. Nick as a forwards and defence coach, Steve as a director of rugby. Those guys are high-calibre coaches, and eventually the right job will come around for those. It's a waiting game, and it's being available. It's being in the right place at the right time. And also from a geographical perspective, for Nick, for Steve Diamond, and those guys, Worcester's a fairly central location within the UK, and it also gives them access to the South Wales market, which is quite big as well. So Ospreys, Cardiff Blues, Dragons, there's always that will regenerate itself. The problem you've got, here is not those guys as much as I have friendships within them. The problem is the ticketing lady who's been working there for, I don't know, a minimum wage for 10 years and does it because she loves Worcester Rugby Club. It's a massive part of her life. And maybe she doesn't work completely for money. She works because she loves being part of rugby and part of the sport. Those are the guys that will really, really struggle. So, look, it's far-reaching. And also, from a player's perspective, you mentioned COVID earlier on. What you have to understand is the salary cap in the UK has been reduced greatly because of COVID. Okay, there's been 1.2 million cut off the salary cap. So teams, whilst they have a contingency for injury, will be spent up. They're spent out. They don't have any more budget to spend. So signing the big marquee players is going to be really, really hard. One of the young guys at Worcester Warriors, and it's a great backstory for you, is a lad called Joe Batley. Joe, at the age of 21, was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer in his neck. Joe fought cancer between the ages of 21 and 22. He thought he'd seen it all. He fought back from cancer, has been one of the form second rows locks in the Premiership this year. And suddenly the rug's pulled out from under his feet and he has no contract. As luck would have it, he's gone down to Bristol Bears, the club where he came from, who've managed to sign him on using some of their injury fund. But, Joe's wife had just left work. They just had their first lighty and, their first baby. And they were looking forward to a completely different existence to what they've got now. It's going to be really, really hard for some of the people. The biggest thing of all, Joe, here is that Worcester had a modest but very, very loyal fan base I went on my Twitter feed and I looked at some of those fans, care workers that were working for the national minimum wage, who built their whole lives around supporting Worcester through all the premiership grounds of the country. An old lady who got a picture of her and Ted Hill next to each other, saying this is the happiest day of my life. And on her Twitter feed, she said, my biggest ambition is to watch Worcester at all the premiership grounds this year. And I thought, crikey, that's such a lovely, modest ambition, yet that's not going to happen. It's those guys that really, really have had the rugs pulled up from out of their feet. But what you have to go back to is Goldring and Whittingham. And also the regulatory authorities, RFU and PRL, have been totally asleep at the wheel. Everybody knew that this was a collision that was coming. The RFU could have done something about this 6-10 weeks ago. They failed to do so. They failed to act. PRL have failed to act. They have let people come into the game that are not fit and proper people. Basically, mate, to use South African expression, it's a cack show, and I'm not going to use the other word on your radio station.
Well, I mean, with the colloquialism that you're using, you've spent quite a bit of time in South Africa. You might as well move here now. We just need to test those Brian skills of yours.
I'd love to come back, mate. Durban is my second home.
Forward now.
I beg your pardon?
Definitely. Move back. Let's have a braai. Let's have this chat over a braai. James, moving forward, where does this leave Worcester Warriors going forward now? Because, I mean, there's so many competitions that could be played. There's so many opportunities for income. If you just look at the competitions that are coming up. However, you can't gamble if you don't have money in your pocket, if that's what you want to call it. So where does it leave them?
At the end of the day, they will have no squad by the end of the month. They'll have no coaches. The ground is under it is in administrative receivership. So no, there's nothing. The earliest chance they've got is September next year, and that is a fact. Anything else between now and then, it is a stone cold fact. There is no rugby at Worcester. There is nothing until September next year. Fact. That's it.
Do you think that there's any investor that would come in and save the show?
Yeah. Unfortunately, right, the Begbies, who are the Begby trainer, who are the receivers, who, I'm not quite sure how good a job they've done. They've certainly talked a good game to the press. As of yet, it rather looks as if they're doing everything they can to pay creditors off. However, I know of two interested parties. One is public, Jim O'Toole. But at the end of the day, there's been so many shenanigans going on in terms of trading companies, in terms of land move, that there's very likely that there could be criminal prosecution against the two owners for dereliction of duty as a director of a company. Until that's resolved, no investor is going to come in waving 30 million around, knowing that there's potentially civil and criminal lawsuits around. It's just not going to happen to Kim. We have to be realistic about this. It is just a mess. However, what I do believe is the goodwill, the good spirit, and most of all, the facility of Worcester is so powerful that at some point it will happen. I think it will take probably 3 months. It will be the other side of Christmas when things start to move. I know people within my close group of friends. I have friends at Worcester who I believe would think they would want that to happen within a 4 to 6 week period. I think that's optimistic, and I think it's going to be September next. I think it's going to be January when you'll start to hear the mechanisms of things clicking into place, when the due diligence of the receivers and the administrators have been done. But I don't think you get anything more between now and sort of January.
It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. We'll have to see how this plays out. But James, you know what? We could chat about this all night, but the fact remains that people need to be taken to task for this. And let's see how things unfold in the months to come. James, before we do let you go, for the listeners and viewers that loved your chat and would love to follow the story further and going on, could you just drop your social media handles so that they could follow you and know where they can follow your stories?
So at James Weil on Twitter, JamesWhile. And obviously follow my articles on Planet Rugby. There's a lot there. There's a very good exclusive article with Paul Bolton, the Worcester Warriors comms director, yesterday. It's on planetrugby.com, and there's a lot of information and backstory on there, Thakir. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, James. A pleasure chatting to you once again. Look forward to chatting to you real soon, and hopefully we can hear what's happening with the South Africa's tour of Europe in November. Let's wait and see. Thanks so much. Until we chat again, James.
Bye, donkey. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. Come to South Africa. We're waiting for you. That was James Wild, Planet Rugby journalist, all the way in the UK, chatting to us about all things rugby and what exactly is going down at Worcester Warriors. We're going to break for a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be chatting all things sports.